Hey guys, sorry about that. My audio was set wrong and forgot to set that before I came live. Oops, sorry about that. Uh, so today I just want to hit something up that I've been thinking about in light of kind of what I cover, the kind of games I cover, the type of companies I cover. Um, I just wanted to talk about it for a minute. And honestly, I kind of want your opinion on it as well. So if you guys want to leave comments at the end of this and tell me what you think is going to happen, I am happy to take your opinions under advisement. But I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen and what I think is going on. I'm going to talk about the recalibration of the hobby of the market and what that looks like and why it's coming, what it's going to look like, and who I think is going to be most impacted. And then at the end, I'm going to kind of explain what I think is going to look like post recalibration. Um, Not because I'm the smartest person in the room, but because I honestly believe that we're beginning the process of seeing a recalibration of the market itself, which isn't a bad thing. Every market goes through recalibrations, especially markets that are heavily dependent on consumerism. Like you could say the same thing about film. You can say the same thing about books. You can say the same thing about pretty much anything that requires heavily on consumers. Um, but so here's my kind of golden take. Um, I'm going to phrase this starting with a Mark Twain quote that I think is kind of apt here, and that's rumors of my demise have been greatly exaggerated. The tabletop industry is not going to die. It is not going to go under. It is not going to go away. It is not going to cease to be. Um, I know that there's a lot of people who, I shouldn't say a lot, there are people who believe that with a lot of what they've seen in the industry, that something will happen and it will somehow the industry will just collapse. That is not going to happen. There are too many hardcore people involved, too many hardcore consumers, too many hardcore players for the industry to quickly collapse. That does not mean that there will not be a recalibration. And then let me go ahead and explain what I mean by the recalibration. So the recalibration is going to be a shift from in the market from certain types of companies and certain games to more small press, indie press type games. And let me explain real quick why I think that. Okay, so first and foremost, I think you're going to see a major shift in who is buying what type of game. Because I think that a lot of the last 6 or 8 years have been driven by people that, for lack of a better term, are casual or tourist players. They came into the hobby because of things like Stranger Things, Big Bang Theory, COVID drove a lot of people into tabletop gaming. Um, those things drove a lot of people who weren't really part of the hobby before into the hobby. Not all those people are going to leave, but there is going to be a great portion of those people that are going to leave because the hobby is going to come out of vogue. It's not going to be popular. There's not going to be as much uh, media pushing the hobby. Therefore, they're just not going to be as interested in it anymore, and they're going to leave. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because it's going to be healthy for the hobby to get rid of people who are kind of driving a little bit of change in the hobby that aren't really interested in the hobby. That's a drama issue that I'm not going to touch. There are other people that will talk about that. Um, that being said, uh, what's happening is you're going to see the biggest companies and the biggest games are going to be the ones that I think get impacted the worst. Uh, because those games are such front and center and those companies are so front and center of the hobby, they're going to be the ones that lose the most momentum in the hobby. Um, where, Wizards of the Coast saw a huge spike in players, especially during COVID and immediately post COVID. You're going to see a lot of those players as they leave, they're not going to leave freely. They're not going to leave these smaller presses, Modifius, Pelgrin, the other small press companies, medium small press companies. Um, because the people that are playing those games are generally longtime players, longtime fans of the hobby. Wizards of the Coast, Chaosium, some other companies, a couple other bigger companies, those will be the people that feel the pinch as the recalibration starts to take effect. Again, those companies will not die. Do not mistake me for saying that. They are not going to die. Wizards is too big. It's part of a huge conglomerate that will not let it die. Um, they would sell it before they let it die. Um, all that being said, you look at these companies and you look at how it's working right now, and those are going to be the companies that I think we're going to see the biggest shift come from, which means small press companies are going to be the ones that benefit from a recalibration because what you're going to see is that their sales are not going to adjust nearly as bad. Um, and when I say as bad, I want you to understand I'm not talking about like losing 50% of your sales here. I'm talking you may see a drop in sales for Wizards of the Coast of 3 to 6%. Maybe a little slightly more. I think it's under 10%. Um, but when you're talking about a niche hobby, 3% is a lot of sales. That is a lot of money. That is a lot of energy and a lot of um, loss. Because then you're not going to be able to support producing new products and a bunch of other stuff. So those are going to be the companies, and then like I said, these medium, small press companies are going to be the companies that pick up the slack because the people that are mostly buying their games are going to be mostly long-term players, people who have been part of the hobby for a long time and they care deeply about the hobby. And so they're going to continue buying from the small press companies because they actually really love the hobby. You will still see some constriction on every company as more casual players leave, but not nearly as bad as you will in the bigger companies. So if we say Wizards loses 4%, 5% of its sales, someone like Free League may lose like 1%. Just because the people who buy Free League are not casual players. They are hobbyists at heart. Um, that's the coming recalibration. That is what the recalibration is all about. It is about people who were not part of the hobby for a long time, came into the hobby, but were really never sold on the hobby, are not going to stay in the hobby. And what that's going to do is that is going to change the way the hobby looks because what you're going to have to do is you're either going to adapt or die. Um, so big companies that are marketing to the more uh, like I said, I don't know any other word other than casual. The more casual player are going to have to change their marketing strategies to redirect them towards the serious hobbyist in order to maintain. And that's another part of the recalibration that's coming. Um, you can't continue marketing to people who are not actually interested in staying in part of the hobby. Again, you can see this in anything that relies on consumerism. You can see it in movies, you can see it in novels, you can see it in board games, video games, uh, anything that requires you to routinely consume and routinely pay out requires you to adjust to the reality. So, um, looking at consoles is a good example. Looking at console gaming is having to change drastically as PC gaming is beginning to overtake it. And it's a recalibration in gaming and video gaming. So let's just be honest here. So the recalibration that's coming is not a bad thing. As far as what do I think the hobby looks like in say 5 years, I think in 5 years, I think you're going to hear less about the big companies. You're going to hear less conversation in general uh, about uh, Dungeons and Dragons, and you're going to hear less in places like Reddit and Twitter and YouTube about the hobby as the hobby begins to recede back into what it always really was niche. Um, you're going to see less of that. You're going to see less people discussing it. Um, and that's not always, again, not a bad thing. Another thing I think you're going to see is you're going to see a decline in popularity of all but the biggest live play channels. And even some of those live play channels will see some significant drop in participation and engagement because, again, the hobby is, I think, very clearly split right now between people who are hobbyists and people who got into the hobby because it became popular uh, for various reasons. So, I mean, you can debate that. You can say that that's not how it is, and that's fine. There's plenty of room for debate in that statement, but I do think that is a generalized split in the hobby right now, where we have a split between the hobbyist and the more casual guy who plays D&D because he started watching Stranger Things and maybe he played when he was young and he hadn't played in a long time or whatever. So you're going to see a lot of difference in those players sticking around. Like I said, and then like I said, what you're going to see is you're going to see um, more minor companies, more small press games um, grow. And I don't mean the OSR, by the way. I'm talking about companies that are producing alternatives to the mainstream RPG. For example, you're going to see something like Volson will have a little more uh, market power because the people that are playing Volson are a different breed than the people that are playing Call of Cthulhu. Um, while I still love Call of Cthulhu, Volson I think it's more gamer centric game. Is the way I'll phrase that. So it's going to attract a certain type of person who's going to stick with that game, even if the market begins to recalibrate. So just know that the recalibration that's coming, it really boils down to a couple of things. I know this sounds repetitive, but it comes down to a couple of things. It comes down to players wanting to stick around. It comes to marketing your product to people who are going to stick around. And then it also comes down to what happens when the shrink actually hits. Um, so we have to take all those things into account when we're talking about games and we're talking about the RPG industry. So just know that's where I stand on the recalibration. Like I said, I don't think the industry's going anywhere and it's going to die. Um, and if I had my way, I would take a lot of these people that we would call, like I said, we would call, for lack of a better term, more casual players and turn them into hardcore hobbyists because it would be awesome to have that many people that would stay around for 20 or 30 or 40 years. Um, but we won't hold on to a lot of those people. You're already kind of starting to see it. And like I said, and then there's other issues in the hobby that, like, because I'm not going to get into the drama. Well, I'm not, like I said, if you want to get into the drama side of it, go watch any number of other channels. There are plenty of people who discuss that. I'm not going to discuss it, but there are other things that have happened. But just throwing one out there, the OGL debacle from a couple of years ago being an example that kind of hurt Wizards' standing and drove players into small market games and stuff like that. So there are other things that are going to impact the recalibration of the hobby. Um, as a player, what would I tell you to do? Keep buying, buy the games you love, support the companies you enjoy, um, and don't be caught off guard when companies like Paizo or Wizards or Chaosium or any of the big names have to kind of adjust how they're producing products and stuff to adjust for the sudden, I won't even say sudden, for the loss of player base and things like that. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised to see less books coming out. Don't be surprised to see the quality of the books go up in order to attract players back to companies that have made mistakes. Uh, don't be surprised about any of that. Either way, guys, I'd love to hear what you guys think about this as far as what you think is going to happen. Do you think the culture is going to recalibrate? Do you think the hobby is going to recalibrate? Do you think I'm totally off my rock? I've done a lot of talking. I talk to people inside the industry. That's where I get a lot of these ideas. um, but do you think that the industry is going to recalibrate? Do you think the industry is going to just collapse? Do you see something like Wizards of the Coast eventually being forced to be sold because it's not profitable anymore, whatever? I'd love to hear what you guys think. As always, thoughts, comments, questions, concerns in the comments. As always, guys, for the love of God, no ad hominems, no picking fights, and don't leave me college dissertations. I don't have time to read those types of comments. Other than that, guys, we do hope you have fun and do hope to see you guys around the game table at some point.